You know that moment when your entire world shatters with just a few words? When the person you trusted most looks you in the eye and tells you that you're not enough. That happened to me on a cold November night, and what I did next changed everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, back to when I thought I had it all figured out. My name is Sarah, and 3 years ago, I met the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. Her name was Jessica. God, even saying her name now brings back this weird mix of emotions I can't quite describe. When we met, it was like something out of a movie. I was working as a financial analyst at a mid-size firm in Seattle, putting in long hours, building my career, trying to create a stable future. Jessica was this vibrant, energetic marketing executive with a smile that could light up an entire room. She had this way of making everyone around her feel special, like they were the only person that mattered. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. I wasn't even going to go that night. I'd had a brutal week at work, and honestly, all I wanted to do was curl up on my couch with some takeout and binge-watch whatever series I was into at the time. But my best friend Marcus practically dragged me out of my apartment, telling me I needed to live a little, that I was becoming too focused on work and forgetting about life. Looking back now, I wish I'd stayed home that night. I wish I'd never met her. But that's the thing about life, isn't it? We can't go back and change the moments that break us. Jessica and I hit it off immediately. We talked for hours that night about everything and nothing. She told me about her dreams of starting her own marketing agency one day. I told her about my plan to eventually become a financial consultant and work for myself. We bonded over our ambitions, our drive, our desire to build something meaningful. By the end of that night, we'd exchanged numbers, and I remember walking back to my car with this stupid grin on my face, feeling like maybe, just maybe, I'd met someone special. The first year was incredible. We did everything together. Weekend trips to the mountains, lazy Sunday mornings with coffee and pancakes, late-night conversations about our future. Jessica moved into my apartment after 6 months, and it felt natural, like we were already a unit, already a team. She had this way of making ordinary moments feel extraordinary. A simple grocery run would turn into an adventure. Cooking dinner together would turn into a dance party in the kitchen. I felt alive in a way I'd never experienced before. Smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. About 18 months into our relationship, I proposed. I'd been planning it for weeks, trying to make it perfect. I took her back to the same hiking trail where we'd gone on our third date, the one with the overlook that gave you this breathtaking view of the Cascade Mountains. It was sunset. The sky was painted in these brilliant shades of orange and pink, and when I got down on one knee and pulled out that ring, I swear I saw tears in her eyes. She said yes. She said yes without hesitation, and in that moment, I felt like the luckiest person in the world. We started planning the wedding immediately. Jessica wanted something big, something elegant. A spring wedding with 200 guests, an upscale venue, the works. Now I'm more practical, more budget conscious. I suggested we do something smaller, more intimate, so we could save money for a down payment on a house. But Jessica had her heart set on this dream wedding, and honestly, I wanted to make her happy. So I picked up extra consulting work on the side, worked longer hours, did whatever I could to make sure we could afford the wedding she wanted while still saving for our future. That's when things started to shift, though I didn't see it at the time. I was so busy working, so focused on building our financial foundation that I didn't notice the small changes. Jessica started going out more with her work friends. She'd come home later, sometimes after I'd already gone to bed because I had early morning meetings. She became more distant, more irritable. When I'd ask her about her day, she'd give me short, clipped answers. When I'd try to discuss wedding plans, she'd seem distracted, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. I told myself it was just stress. Wedding planning is stressful, right? And her job was demanding. She'd recently gotten a promotion to senior marketing director, which came with more responsibilities, more pressure. I convinced myself that once we got through this busy season, once the wedding was over and we settled into married life, things would go back to how they were in the beginning. God, I was so naive. About 6 months before our wedding date, things got worse. Jessica started picking fights over nothing. I'd forget to pick up milk from the grocery store, and she'd act like I'd committed some unforgivable crime. I'd suggest we stay in for a quiet night, and she'd accuse me of being boring, of not wanting to have fun anymore. She started making these comments about my job, about how I was always working, about how I never made time for her anymore. The irony was painful because I was working those extra hours for us, for our future, for the wedding she wanted. I tried to talk to her about it, I really did. I'd sit her down and say, "Jessica, what's going on? You seem unhappy, talk to me." But she'd brush me off, tell me I was being dramatic, that everything was fine. Or she'd flip it around on me, say that I was the problem, that I was too sensitive, that I was imagining things. I started to doubt myself, to wonder if maybe I was the issue. Maybe I wasn't giving her enough attention. Maybe I was too focused on work. Maybe I wasn't the partner she needed. Then came that November night, the night that changed everything. It was a Friday. I remember because I'd actually managed to leave work early for once. I'd planned this whole evening for us. I picked up dinner from Jessica's favorite Italian restaurant, the one across town that made this incredible seafood pasta she loved. I bought flowers, set up candles in the dining room, put on the playlist of songs that were meaningful to us. I was determined to reconnect with her, to show her that I still cared, that I was still invested in us. But Jessica never came home at her usual time. 6 o'clock passed, then 7, then 8. I texted her asking if she was okay, if she was still at work. No response. I called, straight to voicemail. By 9 o'clock, I was starting to worry. By 10, I was considering calling hospitals. And then at almost 11:30 at night, I heard the front door open. The smell hit me first. Alcohol, strong, unmistakable. Jessica stumbled into the apartment. Her hair disheveled, her makeup smeared, her dress, a tight black number I'd never seen before, wrinkled and askew. She was drunk. Not tipsy, not buzzed. Completely, utterly drunk. She could barely walk straight, had to use the wall to steady herself as she made her way into the living room where I was sitting, my phone in my hand, relief and anger and confusion all mixing together in my chest. "Where have you been?" I asked, standing up. "I've been worried sick. You didn't answer any of my calls or texts." She looked at me with these unfocused eyes and laughed, actually laughed. It was this bitter, harsh sound that I'd never heard from her before. "I was out," she slurred. "Out having fun, something you wouldn't know anything about." I tried to stay calm. "Jessica, you're drunk. Let me get you some water and we can talk about this in the morning." That's when she said it, the words that would replay in my mind 1,000 times over the coming weeks. "You know what, Sarah?" She pointed a wavering finger at me. "I think you need to leave." I just stared at her, not understanding. "What? This is our apartment. You're drunk. You're not making sense." She stepped closer and I could see something in her eyes, something cold, something cruel. "I'm making perfect sense for the first time in months. You need to leave because I deserve better than this, better than you." The room felt like it was tilting. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that you're boring, Sarah. You're safe and stable and so incredibly boring. All you do is work and save money and plan for some future that sounds like a prison sentence. Where's the excitement? Where's the passion? I deserve someone who makes me feel alive, not someone who makes me feel like I'm already settling into some sad, middle-aged existence at 32. Each word was a knife, each sentence cut deeper. I felt tears starting to burn in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. "You're drunk," I repeated, my voice shaking. "You don't mean this." "I absolutely mean it," she shot back. "I've been thinking about this for months. You're not enough for me. You've never been enough. I thought maybe you'd change, maybe you'd become more interesting, more fun, but you're just you, and that's not what I want anymore." I stood there in our living room, surrounded by the cold candles and wilted flowers, and the dinner I'd bought hours ago, now congealed and unappetizing, and I felt something inside me crack. But underneath the hurt, underneath the shock and the pain, something else was stirring. A cold, clear anger. A realization that I'd been played, that I'd been killing myself working extra hours for someone who saw me as nothing more than boring, as not enough. "Get out," Jessica said again, moving toward the bedroom. "Or don't, I don't care, I'm going to bed." And she did. She just walked into our bedroom, into the bed we'd shared for over 2 years, and passed out, leaving me standing there with my world in pieces around me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, my mind racing, my heart breaking, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Part of me wanted to believe it was just the alcohol talking, that in the morning Jessica would wake up, apologize, tell me she didn't mean any of it. But a deeper part of me, the part I'd been ignoring for months, knew the truth. This had been building for a while. The distance, the irritability, the late nights. This wasn't a drunken outburst. This was the truth finally spilling out. As the sun started to rise, painting the Seattle sky in soft shades of gray and gold, Jessica emerged from the bedroom. She looked rough, hungover, her eyes bloodshot and her skin pale. When she saw me still sitting on the couch, still in the same clothes from the night before, something flickered across her face. Guilt? Regret? I couldn't tell. "Sarah," she started, her voice hoarse. I held up my hand. Don't. I was drunk last night. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. My voice was calm now, eerily calm. Drunk words are sober thoughts, right? That's what they say. You meant every word. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. "I need to know something," I said, looking directly at her. "Is there someone else?" The way her eyes widened, just for a fraction of a second, told me everything I needed to know before she even opened her mouth. "No," she said, but it was too quick, too defensive. "Why would you ask that?" "Because people don't just suddenly decide their partner of 3 years isn't enough unless there's a comparison being made. So I'll ask you again, is there someone else?" Jessica's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, defensiveness, guilt, and finally defiance. "What does it matter?" And there it was. Not a confession exactly, but close enough. My suspicions confirmed by a non-denial. I stood up slowly, my body aching from a night spent on the couch, my heart aching from something much worse. "It matters because I've spent the last 6 months working myself to exhaustion to pay for a wedding, our wedding, while you've apparently been deciding I'm not good enough for you. It matters because I deserve honesty at the very least." "You want honesty?" Jessica's hangover seemed to sharpen her tongue rather than dull it. "Fine. Yes, I've been seeing someone. His name is David. He's exciting and spontaneous and makes me feel things I haven't felt in years. He doesn't spend every Friday night going over budget spreadsheets. He actually knows how to have fun." I should have felt more surprised, more shocked, but instead I just felt numb and angry, so incredibly angry. How long? Does it really matter? How long, Jessica? She sighed, rubbing her temples. 4 months. We met at a marketing conference in Portland. 4 months. A third of a year. While I was working overtime, while I was planning our future, while I was trying to be a good partner, she'd been with someone else. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that for a moment I couldn't breathe. "I want you out," I said quietly. "What?" "You heard me. This is my apartment. I had it before you moved in. My name is the only one on the lease. I want you out." Jessica's defiance crumbled slightly. "Sarah, come on. We can talk about this. We don't have to make rash decisions." "Rash decisions?" I almost laughed. "You've been cheating on me for 4 months and told me I wasn't good enough for you, but I'm the one making rash decisions by asking you to leave. I have nowhere to go right now. Can we just—" "You have David, don't you? I'm sure he'd be happy to take you in. You have until tomorrow night to get your things and be gone." The look on Jessica's face was almost worth the pain in my chest. Almost. She'd expected me to fall apart, to beg, to plead for her to stay and work things out. But I was done. In that moment, standing in the ruins of what I thought was my future, I decided I wasn't going to be the pathetic, heartbroken victim in this story. Jessica did leave, though it took her 3 days instead of 1. 3 days of uncomfortable silence, of her packing her things while I worked from home, making sure she didn't take anything that wasn't hers. 3 days of her occasionally trying to start conversations that I shut down immediately. 3 days of her tears and apologies that felt hollow and self-serving. When she finally left, taking the last box of her belongings to her car, she paused at the door. "I did love you, Sarah. I hope you know that." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I was already starting to see a stranger where my fiancé used to be. No, you didn't, because if you loved me, you never would have done this. The door closed behind her and I was alone, truly alone for the first time in 3 years. The apartment felt bigger, emptier, quieter. I walked through the rooms, seeing all the spaces where her things used to be. The bathroom counter where her makeup was scattered. The closet where her clothes hung. The nightstand where she kept her books. All of it was gone, and in its place was just nothing. That night, I did something I rarely did. I opened a bottle of wine and I let myself cry. I cried for the time I'd wasted, for the future I'd planned that would never happen, for the person I thought Jessica was but clearly never existed. I cried until I had no tears left, until my eyes were swollen and my throat was raw. But when I woke up the next morning, something had shifted. The heartbreak was still there, yes, but it was joined by something else. A cold, calculated determination. Jessica had betrayed me, humiliated me, discarded me like I meant nothing. And she'd done it while I was funding her dream wedding, while I was sacrificing my time and energy for our supposed future together. I thought about all the deposits I'd put down. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, the florist. Thousands and thousands of dollars, most of it coming from my savings and my extra work. I thought about the engagement ring I'd bought, the one that cost me 3 months' salary because I wanted it to be perfect for her. I thought about the joint wedding account we'd set up, the one I'd been contributing to every month while Jessica barely added anything, always saying she'd catch up later. And I realized something important. Jessica might have broken my heart, but she'd also made a crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. She'd assumed I'd just let her walk away, that I'd quietly accept this betrayal and move on with my life. She thought I was boring, safe, predictable. She had no idea what I was capable of. I spent that weekend doing something that would have bored Jessica to tears, but that I was actually very good at. I went through every financial document, every contract, every receipt related to our relationship and our planned wedding. I organized everything into folders, both physical and digital. I made spreadsheets, tracked every dollar, documented every contribution. And as I worked, a plan began to form in my mind. Jessica wanted to paint me as the boring, joyless partner who held her back. Fine. But she was going to learn that boring and methodical also meant thorough and strategic. She was going to learn that the stability she'd mocked was exactly what had been holding her irresponsible, impulsive life together. By Sunday evening, I had a complete picture, and it was even better than I'd hoped. The engagement ring, I'd bought it entirely with my own money. The apartment, my lease, my security deposit, my furniture, the wedding venue, deposit paid by me, the caterer, me, the photographer, me. In fact, of the nearly $40,000 we'd spent on wedding preparations, Jessica had contributed less than $5,000. She'd been so busy with her exciting new relationship that she'd barely participated in funding her dream wedding. And then there was the joint account, the one we'd opened specifically for wedding expenses. I'd been automatically transferring money into it every month. But when I logged in to check the balance, I found something very interesting. Over the past 2 months, there had been several large withdrawals I hadn't made. I dug deeper, checking the transaction history, and found charges at expensive restaurants, high-end hotels, and luxury boutiques. All of them in Portland, where David apparently lived. Jessica hadn't just been cheating on me emotionally. She'd been using our wedding fund, the money I'd worked overtime to save, to finance her affair. The rage that filled me in that moment was white-hot and clarifying. This wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. This was about justice. This was about making sure Jessica understood that actions have consequences, that you can't just use people and throw them away without any repercussions. I took screenshots of everything. Every transaction, every withdrawal, every receipt. I documented it all meticulously, my financial analyst brain working overtime, seeing patterns and building a case. And then I started making phone calls. First, to the wedding venue. I explained the situation, that the wedding was canceled, and asked about the refund policy. Second, to the caterer, the photographer, the florist, every vendor we'd booked. One by one, I worked my way through the list, canceling everything, documenting who would provide refunds and who wouldn't, always making sure to note that all payments had been made by me personally. Then I did something that felt both petty and completely justified. I called Jessica's parents. I'd met them several times over the years. They were nice people, traditional, family-oriented, the type who were deeply excited about their daughter's upcoming wedding. Jessica had always been a little spoiled, a little indulged, and I could see where she got it from. But her parents also valued honesty and commitment. They'd raised Jessica in the church, taught her about loyalty and integrity, or at least they'd tried to. When Jessica's mother, Patricia, answered the phone, her voice was warm and welcoming. "Sarah, how lovely to hear from you. How are the wedding plans coming along?" "Actually, Patricia, that's why I'm calling. I need to tell you something, and it's not going to be easy to hear." The warmth in her voice shifted to concern. "What's wrong, dear? Is everything okay?" "The wedding is canceled. Jessica and I have separated." There was a long pause. What happened? You two seemed so happy." And then I told her, not with anger or tears, but with calm, factual clarity. I explained about Jessica coming home drunk, about her confession of the affair, about the 4 months she'd been seeing someone else while we planned our wedding. I didn't embellish, didn't dramatize. I just stated the facts. Patricia was silent for a long time after I finished. Then, in a voice tight with emotion, she said, "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I don't know what to say. This isn't how we raised her." "I know you didn't, Patricia, and I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but there's something else you should know." I explained about the wedding fund, about the withdrawals, about how Jessica had been using money meant for our future to fund her affair. I could hear Patricia's sharp intake of breath, could almost picture her face. "That's theft," Patricia said quietly. "Technically, since it was a joint account, it's not legally theft. But morally, yes, I'd say so." We talked for a few more minutes, Patricia apologizing over and over for her daughter's behavior, me reassuring her that it wasn't her fault. When we hung up, I felt a grim satisfaction. Jessica's parents were generous people who'd been planning to contribute significantly to the wedding. That money would now definitely not be coming, and Jessica would have to explain why. But I wasn't done, not even close. Over the next week, I continued to execute my plan with the same methodical precision I brought to my work. I contacted our mutual friends, not to gossip or badmouth Jessica, but simply to inform them that the wedding was canceled due to Jessica's infidelity. I didn't need to embellish or exaggerate. The facts spoke for themselves, and with each conversation, I could feel the narrative shifting. The friends who'd maybe thought of me as the boring one, the workaholic one, started to see me differently. Started to see Jessica differently too. I also started documenting everything Jessica had left behind. See, in her rush to move in with David, she'd been careless. She'd taken her clothes and personal items, but she'd left other things, important things. Her laptop charger was still here, which meant her old laptop. The one she'd replaced 6 months ago but never properly wiped was probably in one of the boxes she'd stored in the basement storage unit. A storage unit that was technically mine, attached to my apartment lease. I went down there on a Tuesday evening after work. The storage unit was small, packed with boxes we'd labeled for things we didn't need immediate access to. Holiday decorations, old textbooks, memorabilia. And there in the back corner was a box labeled Jessica Old Electronics. Inside, I found exactly what I was looking for. Her old laptop, an iPad she'd stopped using, and several external hard drives. Now, before you think I crossed some legal line, let me be clear. This was property left in my storage unit, in a space Jessica no longer had any legal right to access. And I wasn't planning to do anything illegal with what I might find. I was just curious, just doing my due diligence to make sure there was nothing in my storage that belonged to anyone else. The laptop still worked, and Jessica, predictable as ever, had used the same password she always used, a combination of her childhood dog's name and her birth year. I wasn't surprised when it logged in on my first try, and what I found inside was even more interesting than I'd anticipated. Emails, hundreds of them going back months. Jessica hadn't been good about deleting things from her old laptop before she switched to her new one. The email account was still logged in, still syncing. And there, in painful, explicit detail, was the entire timeline of her affair with David. The first emails were from 7 months ago, not 4 like Jessica had told me. 7 months. They'd met at that marketing conference in Portland, just like she'd said, but the affair had started immediately. The emails were flirtatious at first, then increasingly intimate. David would write these long messages about how beautiful Jessica was, how exciting, how she deserved to be worshipped. Jessica would respond talking about how trapped she felt, how boring her life had become, how she was stuck with someone who didn't appreciate her. Reading those emails felt like being stabbed over and over. She'd been complaining about me, about our relationship, to this man while I was working late hours to save for our wedding. She'd been telling him I was boring and predictable while I was picking up extra consulting projects to afford the expensive venue she wanted. The betrayal was so deep, so complete, that I had to close the laptop several times just to breathe through the pain. But I kept reading because buried in that pain was something valuable. Information, ammunition. I learned that David was married. Happily married, according to his social media, with 2 young kids and a wife named Amanda who posted cheerful family photos every week. Jessica knew this. The emails made it clear she knew from the beginning. David had told her he wasn't going to leave his wife, that this was just a fun escape from his responsibilities. And Jessica had been fine with that, at least initially. She'd told him she understood, that she wasn't ready to leave me anyway, that she liked having her stable life with me while enjoying excitement with him. I was her safety net, her boring, reliable safety net who paid the bills and saved for the future while she had her adventure on the side. The rage I felt reading that could have powered a small city, but I didn't let it consume me. Instead, I channeled it. I saved every email, backed them up in 3 different places, and started planning my next move. See, Jessica thought she could have it all. The stable partner funding her lifestyle and the exciting affair partner making her feel alive. And when she decided she was done with me, she thought she could just walk away without consequences, maybe even end up with David. But the emails told a different story. David had been pulling back lately, worried his wife was getting suspicious, talking about ending things with Jessica. That's probably why Jessica had been so irritable, so angry. Her fantasy was falling apart. I spent the next few days thinking about what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to reach out to Amanda, David's wife, to tell her what her husband had been doing. But that felt too chaotic, too unpredictable. I didn't know Amanda. I didn't know how she'd react or what she might do. And honestly, my issue wasn't with her. It was with Jessica. Then I remembered something. Jessica had been bragging for weeks about a huge promotion she was up for at work. Senior Vice President of Marketing, a position that would come with a significant salary increase and a lot of prestige. She'd been talking about it constantly, about how this was her big break, how this would change everything for her career. The final interview was scheduled for next week. I did some digging into Jessica's company. It was a mid-sized tech firm with a very public commitment to ethics and family values. Their CEO had built the company culture around trust, integrity, and moral character. They sponsored family events, donated to children's charities, and prominently featured their employees' families in their marketing materials. It was all very wholesome, very image-conscious. And Jessica, who'd been having an affair with a married man while engaged to me, wanted to be the face of their marketing department. I thought about this for a long time. What I was considering felt big, potentially career-damaging for Jessica. But then I'd remember her coming home drunk, telling me I wasn't good enough. I'd remember reading those emails where she mocked me to her affair partner. I'd remember the wedding fund she'd stolen from to pay for hotel rooms with David. She'd made her choices. Now she could live with the consequences. I didn't do anything dramatic. I didn't send anonymous emails or make grand gestures. Instead, I did something much simpler and much more effective. I reached out to a former colleague of mine, someone who'd moved to Jessica's company about a year ago. Her name was Rachel, and we'd stayed friendly, occasionally meeting for coffee to catch up. I invited Rachel to lunch at a quiet cafe downtown. We chatted about work and life, and eventually she brought up the wedding, asked how planning was going. That was my opening. Actually, Rachel, the wedding is off. Jessica and I broke up. Rachel's eyes widened. Oh my God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. What happened? I gave her the abbreviated version. The affair, the betrayal, the way Jessica had been using our wedding fund. I wasn't gossiping. I was just being honest with a friend who'd asked a direct question. And Rachel, being a kind person, was appropriately sympathetic and outraged on my behalf. I can't believe Jessica would do that, Rachel said, shaking her head. And she's about to interview for SVP. The irony. Yeah, I said carefully. I just hope her personal choices don't reflect poorly on your company. I know how much you guys value integrity. Rachel gave me a long look, and I could see her putting pieces together. The affair, she said slowly. Was it with someone married? I nodded. A man named David Chen. He has a wife and 2 kids in Portland. Rachel's expression shifted. David Chen from Chen Digital Marketing. I think so, yes. Why? Because Chen Digital is one of our biggest clients. His company does most of our external marketing campaigns. If Jessica was having an affair with a married client. Rachel trailed off, but I could see her mind working through the implications. I hadn't known that. Honestly, I hadn't. But the universe had just handed me a gift wrapped in karma. That seems like a conflict of interest, I said neutrally. But maybe I'm wrong about his last name. I only heard Jessica mention him a few times. Rachel was already pulling out her phone. No, you're right. David Chen, owner of Chen Digital. I've met him at company events. He always brings his wife. She looked up at me. This is serious, Sarah. If Jessica was having an inappropriate relationship with a client, that's a violation of company policy. A major one. I didn't push. I didn't need to. Rachel's own professional ethics were doing the work for me. We finished lunch with her promising to stay in touch, and me feeling that cold satisfaction settling deeper into my chest. 2 days later, I heard through our mutual friend Marcus that Jessica's interview for SVP had been postponed indefinitely. A week after that, Marcus told me Jessica had been called into a meeting with HR and her department head. By the end of that week, Jessica had been placed on administrative leave while the company conducted an investigation into potential ethics violations. I didn't feel guilty. I'd simply told the truth to a friend. What Rachel chose to do with that information was her decision, based on her own professional obligations. Jessica had created this situation herself by having an affair with a married client and then being careless enough to leave evidence everywhere. But the consequences were just beginning. Jessica's leave from work meant she wasn't getting her full salary, just basic pay. And without the promotion she'd been counting on, without the raise she'd already mentally spent, her financial situation got complicated fast. I knew this because she started calling me. First, it was texts asking if we could talk. Then voicemails, her voice tight and angry, demanding to know what I'd done, what I'd told people. Then, finally, desperate messages asking if I'd be willing to help her out with some money, just temporarily, just until she got back on her feet. I blocked her number. Around this same time, I got a call from Patricia, Jessica's mother. Her voice was sad but firm. Sarah, I wanted you to know that Jessica came to us asking for money. She said she's having some financial difficulties. I see. We told her no. After what she did to you, after learning about the affair and the money she took from your wedding fund, her father and I decided we couldn't support that behavior. We didn't raise her to be deceitful and unfaithful. I appreciate you telling me, Patricia. There's something else, she continued. Jessica told us that you've been sabotaging her, trying to ruin her career. She says you're on some kind of revenge mission. I took a breath, keeping my voice calm and even. Patricia, I've done nothing but tell the truth to people who asked me direct questions. Jessica's career problems are the result of her own choices, her own actions. I didn't make her have an affair with a married client. I didn't make her violate her company's ethics policies. There was a pause, then Patricia sighed. That's what I told her. That if she's facing consequences, it's because of what she did, not because of anything you've done. But she's insisting you're out to get her. I'm not out to get anyone, I said, and it was mostly true. I'm just making sure the truth is known and that I protect myself and my interests. Jessica made her choices. Now she's dealing with the results. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment and thought about Jessica's accusation. Was I on a revenge mission? Maybe. But if I was, it was the most justified revenge I could imagine. I wasn't lying or fabricating stories. I was simply making sure people knew the truth about who Jessica really was, about what she'd done. If that resulted in consequences for her, well, that's what consequences were for. The following week, something else happened that I hadn't anticipated but probably should have. I got a message on LinkedIn from someone named Amanda Chen. My heart rate picked up immediately. I knew that name, David's wife. The message was brief and polite. "Hi, Sarah. I know this is unusual, but I was hoping we could talk. I believe we have some shared experiences that might be worth discussing. Would you be willing to meet for coffee?" I stared at that message for a long time. This was unpredictable, potentially messy. But I was also curious. How had Amanda found me? What did she want to discuss? And honestly, part of me wanted to meet the other woman who'd been betrayed by this situation, even if she'd been betrayed by a different person. I agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a coffee shop in a part of town neither of us frequented. When I arrived, I recognized her immediately from the photos I'd seen on David's social media. She was pretty in an understated way, with tired eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. We got our coffee and sat at a corner table, the awkwardness between us thick and palpable. "Thank you for meeting me," Amanda said finally. "I know this is strange." "How did you find me?" I asked. "David's emails. I found them a few weeks ago on his laptop. Your name came up several times in his correspondence with Jessica. She mentioned you, complained about you." Amanda's mouth twisted bitterly. "I'm sorry about that, by the way. You didn't deserve to be discussed that way." "Neither did you," I said quietly. "I'm sorry about what David did." We sat in silence for a moment, two women connected by betrayal, by the selfish actions of people we'd trusted. "I confronted David," Amanda continued. "He admitted everything. The affair started 7 months ago. He swore it was over, that he'd ended it weeks ago, that it meant nothing. He begged me not to leave, said he'd do anything to make it right." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do. We have 2 kids. It's complicated." "I understand. But I wanted to meet you because I needed to know something. Is Jessica still trying to contact David? Is she trying to continue the affair?" I thought about the emails I'd read, about Jessica's recent desperation. "I don't know," I admitted. "Jessica and I aren't in contact anymore, but based on what I know about her current situation, she might be. She's dealing with some professional and financial difficulties right now. She might see David as a solution to her problems." Amanda nodded slowly, processing this. "David thinks I don't know how to access his email anymore. He changed his password after I confronted him, thinking that would be enough. But I know his patterns. I got into his new email account this morning." She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot. It was an email from Jessica to David, sent 3 days ago. In it, Jessica talked about how much she missed him, how everything in her life was falling apart, how she needed him. She asked if they could meet, just to talk, just to see each other one more time. She promised she wouldn't cause any problems, wouldn't tell Amanda anything. "He hasn't responded," Amanda said. "At least not yet, but I wanted you to see this. I wanted you to know the kind of person she is." Looking at that email, at Jessica's desperate plea to a married man whose life she'd helped damage, I felt a mix of emotions. Satisfaction that she was suffering consequences, anger at her complete lack of remorse or self-awareness, and, surprisingly, a tiny bit of pity. She destroyed her relationship with me, damaged her career, alienated her parents, all for an affair with a man who was never going to leave his wife for her. "What are you going to do with this?" I asked Amanda. She put her phone away and looked at me directly. "I'm going to forward it to Jessica's HR department. David's company works with hers, which means there are professional boundaries that have clearly been violated. If Jessica is going to keep trying to interfere in my marriage, I'm going to make sure there are consequences." I should have told her not to do it, should have said something about taking the high road or moving on. But I didn't. because Amanda was right. Actions had consequences, and Jessica had been skating by on charm and excuses for too long. "I think that's fair," I said simply. Amanda and I talked for another hour. We shared stories about our respective betrayals, found common ground in our pain and anger. By the time we parted ways, we weren't exactly friends, but we were allies of a sort. Two women who'd been underestimated and discarded, who were now taking back control of our narratives. The next week was when everything truly fell apart for Jessica. The email Amanda forwarded to Jessica's company was the final straw in their investigation. Combined with the other evidence of her affair with a client, it was enough for the company to terminate her employment. They cited ethics violations, conflict of interest, and conduct unbecoming of a representative of the company. Jessica was fired, not placed on leave, not given a warning, fired. I heard about it from Rachel, who messaged me expressing shock at how everything had unfolded. I heard about it from Marcus, who'd run into Jessica at a bar where she was apparently drinking heavily and ranting about how everyone had betrayed her. And I heard about it, indirectly, from the increasingly unhinged messages Jessica sent to my blocked number, messages that still came through as notifications even though I couldn't see the content. I finally unblocked her, just long enough to read what she'd been sending. The messages were a journey through the stages of grief, all mixed together. Denial that any of this was really happening, anger at me for supposedly destroying her life. Bargaining, promising that if I'd just help her, just give her another chance, she'd make everything right. Depression, long, rambling messages about how her life was over. And finally, more anger. Blaming me for everything that had gone wrong. There was one message in particular that stood out. "You did this. You couldn't just let me go. You had to destroy everything I worked for. You're vindictive and cruel, and I never should have wasted 3 years with someone like you. I hope you're happy now that you've ruined my life." I read that message several times, feeling that cold anger settle in my chest again. I hadn't ruined her life. She'd done that herself with her lies and her affair and her complete disregard for anyone but herself. All I'd done was make sure people knew the truth. All I'd done was protect myself and my interests. I typed out a response, deleted it, typed another one, deleted that too. Finally, I settled on something simple and direct. "You ruined your own life, Jessica. I just made sure you couldn't ruin mine too. Lose my number." Then I blocked her again, this time on every platform I could think of. Phone, email, social media, everything. I was done giving her any space in my life, even the negative space of her anger and blame. But even with Jessica blocked and mostly out of my life, the ripple effects of everything that had happened continued to spread. Our mutual friends had mostly figured out what had really happened, and the court of public opinion had decidedly ruled in my favor. Jessica's reputation in our social circle was destroyed. People who'd once found her charming and fun now saw her as untrustworthy and selfish. I wish I could say I didn't take any satisfaction in that, but I'd be lying. I did. Every time someone reached out to check on me, to express their shock at what Jessica had done, to tell me I deserved better, I felt a little bit of vindication. I wasn't the boring one, the problem one. I was the one who'd been wronged, and people could see that now. About a month after Jessica was fired, I got an unexpected visitor. I was working from home, focused on a particularly complex financial analysis, when there was a knock at my door. I checked the peephole and saw Patricia, Jessica's mother, standing in the hallway holding what looked like a check. I opened the door, surprised. "Patricia, is everything okay?" She looked older than the last time I'd seen her, more worn down. "Sarah, I'm sorry to drop by unannounced. I tried calling, but I think maybe you blocked the family number." I had, actually, after Jessica's father had called once trying to plead Jessica's case. "I'm sorry about that. Things have been complicated." "I understand." She held out the check. "This is from Jessica's father and me. It's $5,000, the amount Jessica took from your wedding fund. We know it doesn't make up for what she did, but we wanted to make it right." I stared at the check, not taking it immediately. "Patricia, you don't have to do this. That wasn't your responsibility." "Maybe not legally," she said. "But morally, we raised Jessica. We taught her right from wrong, or at least we tried to. The fact that she stole from you, that she treated you so poorly, reflects on us as parents. Please take it. It'll help us feel like we've done something to address the harm our daughter caused." I took the check, my throat tight with unexpected emotion. "Thank you. This means more than you know." Patricia nodded, then hesitated. "I also wanted to tell you that Jessica has moved back in with us, temporarily. She couldn't afford her rent after losing her job, and David, well, he made it clear she couldn't stay with him." "I see." "She's angry, Sarah, very angry, mostly at you, but also at the world in general. She doesn't think any of this is her fault. She sees herself as the victim in all of this." Patricia's eyes were sad. "I don't know if she'll ever take responsibility for what she did, but I wanted to warn you in case she tries to contact you or cause problems." A chill ran down my spine. "What kind of problems?" "I don't know exactly, but she's been talking about how unfair everything is, how you turned people against her. Her father and I are watching her closely, but she's an adult. We can't control her actions." Patricia put a hand on my arm. "Just be careful, okay? And if she does anything concerning, call the police. Don't hesitate." After Patricia left, I sat in my apartment holding that check and thinking about what she'd said. Jessica saw herself as the victim. Of course she did. People like her always did. They could burn down everything around them and still find a way to blame someone else for the fire. I thought about getting a security system for my apartment, maybe a camera for the door. It seemed paranoid, but Patricia's warning had been genuine. And I'd learned over the past few months that I couldn't predict what people were capable of when they felt cornered and desperate. That night, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I looked at Jessica's social media. She'd blocked me, but I had a secondary account I used for following businesses and industry news. From that account, I could see her public posts. What I found was disturbing. Jessica had been posting long, rambling status updates about betrayal and revenge, about how people showed their true colors when you were down. She posted vague references to someone who'd sabotaged her career out of jealousy. She shared quotes about karma and justice, clearly implying that she was the wronged party waiting for the universe to correct things. Her friends, the ones who didn't know the full story, were commenting with sympathy and support, but anyone who knew the truth could see through the performance. Jessica was rewriting history, trying to paint herself as the victim of some conspiracy rather than the architect of her own downfall. I took screenshots of everything, added them to my growing documentation file. If Jessica did try something, if she did escalate beyond social media posts, I wanted a record of her mindset, her statements, her threats, however veiled they might be. The next few weeks passed in an uneasy peace. I focused on my work, took on a few new consulting clients, started rebuilding the savings I'd depleted for a wedding that never happened. I went out with friends, started exercising again, did all the things you're supposed to do when you're moving on from a difficult breakup. But in the back of my mind, I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Jessica to do something dramatic. Patricia's warning had planted a seed of concern that I couldn't quite shake. And then, about 6 weeks after our breakup, it happened. I came home from a meeting with a client to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart immediately started racing. I knew I'd locked it that morning. I was obsessive about checking locks, especially recently. I pulled out my phone, ready to call the police, and carefully pushed the door open wider. The apartment had been ransacked. Not violently, not destructively, but thoroughly searched. Drawers were open, papers were scattered, cushions were moved. Someone had been looking for something. I backed out of the apartment immediately and called 911. While I waited for the police to arrive, I tried to think about what could be missing, what someone would want. My laptop was at the coffee shop where I'd been working. My important documents were in a safe. My jewelry, what little I had, was mostly costume stuff not worth stealing. The police arrived and did a sweep of the apartment to make sure no one was still inside. Then they took my statement while I walked through trying to figure out what, if anything, had been taken. My TV was still there. My laptop charger, my iPad, all the obvious electronics. Nothing seemed to be missing. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" the officer asked. Any enemies, anyone with a grudge. I hesitated, then told them about Jessica. About the breakup, about her recent posts, about Patricia's warning. The officer took notes, asked for Jessica's contact information, and told me they'd follow up. After they left, I sat in my apartment trying to understand what had just happened. If Jessica had broken in, what was she looking for? What could I possibly have that she wanted badly enough to commit a crime? And then it hit me. Her laptop. The old laptop with all the emails, all the evidence of her affair. She must have realized she'd left it behind, must have panicked thinking about what might be on it. Maybe someone had mentioned something to her, or maybe she'd just realized the risk. Either way, she'd come looking for it. But the laptop wasn't here anymore. After I'd read through everything and made my backups, I'd put it in a safety deposit box at my bank, along with the hard drives and other evidence. I didn't trust leaving it in my apartment where it could be stolen or damaged. And now, it seemed, that paranoia had paid off. I called the police back and explained about the laptop, about why Jessica might have been looking for it. They seemed interested, asked me to come down to the station the next day to make a more detailed statement. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Every car passing outside made me tense. I'd changed my locks after Jessica moved out, so she shouldn't have had a key, but clearly she'd found a way in. Maybe she'd made a copy before returning hers. Maybe she'd picked the lock. Either way, my home no longer felt safe. The next morning, exhausted and anxious, I went to the police station. I gave them a detailed statement, showed them some of the screenshots of Jessica's social media posts, explained the timeline of everything that had happened. The officer I spoke with was sympathetic but realistic. Unless we can prove she was the one who broke in, there's not much we can do, he explained. No signs of forced entry, nothing stolen, no witnesses. We'll talk to her, see if she has an alibi for yesterday afternoon, but without concrete evidence. I understood. The justice system required proof, and I didn't have any. Just a strong suspicion and a lot of circumstantial evidence. But if the legal system couldn't help me, I'd have to help myself. I left the police station and went directly to a security company. By the end of the day, I had cameras installed at my front door and in the main living areas of my apartment. I had motion sensors on my windows. I had a monitored alarm system that would alert both me and the police if someone tried to break in again. It was expensive, but it was worth it for the peace of mind. I also did something else. I reached out to a lawyer, explained the entire situation, and asked about getting a restraining order against Jessica. The lawyer was honest with me, said that without explicit threats or a pattern of harassment, it would be difficult to get a judge to approve one. But he helped me document everything, organized all my evidence, and prepared a cease and desist letter that he sent to Jessica on my behalf. The letter was clear and direct. It informed Jessica that any further contact with me, any further attempts to enter my property, any further harassment of any kind would result in legal action. It referenced the police report from the break-in and made it clear that I was taking this seriously. I didn't know if it would work, if Jessica would heed the warning, or if it would just make her angrier. But at least I'd done something. At least I wasn't just sitting around waiting to be victimized again. 2 days after the cease and desist was sent, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You absolute bitch." Jessica's voice was raw with rage. "A restraining order. After everything you've done to me, you have the nerve to threaten me with legal action. Jessica, you broke into my apartment. The police are investigating. This isn't about." "I didn't break into anything. That's my property you stole. My laptop, my personal belongings. You're the criminal here, not me. The laptop you left in my storage unit, in my apartment, after you moved out. That's not theft, Jessica. That's you being careless with your property and me securing items left in my home. You read my private emails. You violated my privacy. You cheated on me for 7 months and stole from our wedding fund. I think we're past the point of you claiming moral high ground about privacy." She was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her breathing hard, trying to control her anger. "What do you want, Sarah? Money? Is that what this is about? Because I don't have any. You made sure of that when you got me fired. I didn't get you fired. You got yourself fired by having an affair with a married client and violating your company's ethics policies. You told people. You spread rumors and lies and turned everyone against me. I told the truth, I said, my voice hard. That's all I've ever done. I told people the truth about what you did, and you couldn't handle the consequences. This isn't over, Jessica hissed. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. Vindictive, cruel, obsessive. Call me again and I'll add it to the harassment documentation, I interrupted. The cease and desist wasn't a suggestion, Jessica. It was a legal warning. Leave me alone, or I will pursue every legal option available to me. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking. So much for the letter scaring her off. If anything, it had just made her more determined to paint herself as the victim. But at least now I had a recording. My phone automatically recorded calls from unknown numbers, a feature I'd enabled after the break-in. Jessica had just handed me more evidence of her harassment, her refusal to accept responsibility, her implicit threats. I sent the recording to my lawyer, who added it to our growing file. He advised me to continue documenting everything, to not engage with Jessica if she tried to contact me again, and to call the police immediately if she showed up at my home or workplace. Living like this, constantly looking over my shoulder, constantly documenting and preparing for the next incident, was exhausting. This wasn't the revenge I'd imagined. I'd wanted Jessica to face consequences for what she'd done, yes, but I hadn't anticipated that those consequences would splash back on me like this, making me feel unsafe in my own home. I started to wonder if it had been worth it. If telling the truth, exposing Jessica's lies, had been the right choice when it had led to all of this chaos and stress. Maybe I should have just let her leave, let her move on with her life while I rebuilt mine in peace. But then I'd remember her face that night, drunk and cruel, telling me I wasn't good enough. I'd remember the emails where she mocked me to her affair partner. I'd remember the thousands of dollars she'd stolen to fund her betrayal. And I'd know that I'd made the right choice. That letting Jessica face the natural consequences of her actions wasn't revenge, it was justice. I just had to get through this difficult part, this period where Jessica was lashing out because she'd finally realized she couldn't charm or manipulate her way out of what she'd done. Eventually, she'd move on. She'd find a new job, a new relationship, a new situation to exploit, and I'd be free of her completely. Or at least, that's what I told myself as I lay awake at night, listening to every sound, wondering if today would be the day Jessica escalated from angry phone calls to something more dangerous. The answer came sooner than I expected. 3 days after that phone call, I was leaving work late, around 8 in the evening. I'd parked in the building's underground garage, and as I walked toward my car, I had that prickling sensation on the back of my neck that told me something wasn't right. The garage was well lit but mostly empty at this hour, and my footsteps echoed off the concrete walls. I picked up my pace, keys already in my hand, when I heard it. Other footsteps. Not echoing mine, but separate, coming from a different direction. I turned and saw her. Jessica, standing about 20 feet away near the garage entrance, just watching me. My heart started pounding. Jessica, what are you doing here? She didn't answer immediately. Just stood there staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Anger, yes, but also something else. Desperation, maybe. Pain. I needed to see you, she finally said. You won't answer my calls. You sent me that threatening letter. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to leave me alone, like the letter said. I pulled out my phone, making sure she could see it. I'm calling the police right now if you don't leave. I just want to talk, Sarah, just 5 minutes. You owe me that much. I don't owe you anything. My thumb hovered over the emergency call button. You have 10 seconds to leave before I call them. Something shifted in Jessica's expression, the desperation giving way fully to anger. You've taken everything from me. My job, my reputation, my friends, my family, everything. And you won't even give me 5 minutes to explain, to try to make you understand. Understand what? That you cheated on me for 7 months. That you stole thousands of dollars from our wedding fund? That you broke into my apartment? I understand perfectly, Jessica. You're selfish and entitled, and you can't accept that your actions have consequences. My actions? Her voice was rising now, echoing through the garage. What about your actions? You systematically destroyed my life. You told everyone about the affair. You got me fired. You turned my own parents against me. That's not consequences, Sarah. That's revenge. That's you being vindictive and cruel. I told the truth, I said, my voice shaking but firm. That's all I did. I told people the truth about what you did, and the rest followed naturally. You want to blame someone for your life falling apart? Look in a mirror. Jessica took a step toward me, and I immediately took a step back, my finger ready to press the call button. Don't come any closer, I warned. I mean it, Jessica. I will call the police. She stopped, but her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. You're going to regret this, she said quietly. You think you've won, but you haven't. I will make sure people know the truth about you. I'll tell them how obsessive you are, how you stalked me, how you read my private emails and weaponized them against me. I'll ruin your reputation the same way you ruined mine. Go ahead, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. Tell whoever you want whatever you want, but you should know that I've documented everything. Every email you sent, every dollar you stole, every lie you told. I have evidence, Jessica. What do you have? Just your word, and given how many lies you've told, I don't think many people are going to believe you. For a moment, we just stood there, two women who used to love each other, now enemies in a dim parking garage. I could see the moment Jessica realized she was beaten, that she had no leverage, no power in this situation. Her shoulders sagged, and the anger in her face gave way to something that looked almost like grief. I did love you, you know, she said softly. In the beginning, before everything got so complicated. No, you didn't, I replied. You loved what I could give you. Stability, financial security, someone to fall back on while you chased excitement somewhere else. But you never loved me, Jessica. If you had, you never would have done what you did. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, then closed it again. What was there to say? We both knew I was right. After a long moment, she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing as she headed toward the garage exit. I stood there watching her go, phone still in my hand, not moving until I heard the sound of a car engine starting and driving away. Only then did I allow myself to breathe. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my keys. I got into my car, locked all the doors, and sat there for a full 10 minutes just trying to calm down. That encounter could have gone so much worse. Jessica could have been violent, could have attacked me, could have done any number of things. But she hadn't. She just talked, threatened emptily, and then left. Maybe it was finally over. I drove home carefully, checking my mirrors constantly to make sure Jessica wasn't following me. When I got to my apartment building, I parked in the well-lit area right by the entrance and practically ran inside. Once I was safe in my apartment with all the locks engaged and the security system armed, I finally let myself fall apart a little. I cried, not from sadness, but from the sheer stress and adrenaline of the past few months, of everything that had happened since that November night when Jessica came home drunk. But even as I cried, I knew I'd made the right choices. Standing up to Jessica tonight, refusing to be intimidated or manipulated, that was important. She needed to understand that I wasn't going to be her victim anymore, that I wasn't going to let her control the narrative or make me feel guilty for her own failures. The next morning, I wrote a detailed account of the parking garage encounter and sent it to my lawyer. He called me immediately, concerned about my safety, asking if I wanted to pursue a formal restraining order now that there was a documented instance of Jessica showing up at my workplace. I thought about it seriously. Part of me wanted the legal protection, the official documentation that would make it a crime for Jessica to come near me. But another part of me thought that might just escalate things further, might push Jessica to do something truly reckless. And after last night, after seeing the defeat in her eyes when she walked away, I thought maybe, just maybe, she was finally ready to move on. I told my lawyer I'd think about it, that I'd let him know if Jessica tried to contact me again. In the meantime, I focused on rebuilding my life in earnest. I'd been in survival mode for so long, just trying to get through each day, to protect myself from whatever Jessica might do next. But I was tired of living like that. I was tired of letting her betrayal and her subsequent harassment define my existence. So I made some changes. I started seeing a therapist, someone who specialized in trauma and betrayal. At first, I was resistant to the idea, felt like it was admitting weakness or giving Jessica's actions more power than they deserved. But my first session changed my mind. Talking through everything that had happened, having someone validate my feelings and experiences, it was incredibly healing. My therapist helped me see that what I was experiencing was a form of grief. I wasn't just mourning the end of a relationship, I was mourning the future I'd planned, the person I thought Jessica was, the life I'd imagined for myself. And grief, she told me, takes time. It's not linear. Some days would be better than others, and that was okay. She also helped me work through my anger. The cold, calculated anger that had driven me to expose Jessica's affair. To make sure she faced consequences. My therapist didn't judge me for it, didn't tell me I was wrong or vindictive. Instead, she helped me understand where that anger came from, how it was a natural response to betrayal, how it had actually served a protective function for me. You were asserting your worth, she explained during one session. Jessica told you that you weren't enough, that you were boring and undeserving. By taking action, by refusing to just accept that narrative, you were proving to yourself that you had value, that you deserved better than how she treated you. That perspective helped. It made me feel less like I was on some petty revenge mission and more like I'd been engaging in justifiable self-advocacy. I hadn't done anything illegal or unethical. I'd simply made sure the truth was known and protected my own interests. If that resulted in negative consequences for Jessica, well, that was the natural result of her own choices. Weeks passed, then a month, then 2 months. Spring arrived in Seattle, bringing rain and cherry blossoms and longer days. I started dating again, nothing serious, just coffee dates and dinner with people I met through apps or mutual friends. It felt strange at first, like I was betraying something, even though I knew that was ridiculous. Jessica had betrayed me, had been cheating for months before our relationship even officially ended. I had nothing to feel guilty about. Some of the dates were awkward, some were boring, and a couple were actually quite nice. I met a woman named Claire who was a teacher, kind and funny and refreshingly uncomplicated. We went out a few times, and while I wasn't sure if it would turn into anything serious, it felt good to connect with someone new, to remember that not everyone was like Jessica. Through all of this, I heard nothing from Jessica. No calls, no texts, no appearances at my workplace or apartment. It was like she'd finally accepted defeat and moved on with her life. I heard through Marcus that she'd found a new job, something in marketing for a smaller company, not as prestigious or well-paying as her old position, but employment nonetheless. She'd moved out of her parents' house and into an apartment with roommates. She was, it seemed, slowly rebuilding her life just as I was rebuilding mine. Part of me felt relieved by this news. Part of me felt that grim satisfaction again. She was facing the consequences of her actions, living a smaller life than she'd planned, but she was surviving. And that seemed fair. I'd never wanted to completely destroy her, despite what she might think. I just wanted justice, accountability, the truth to be known. But there was another part of me, a part I wasn't proud of, that felt almost disappointed. Like I'd been gearing up for a bigger confrontation, a more dramatic conclusion, and instead things had just sort of fizzled out. Jessica had walked away from that parking garage encounter, and that had been it. No grand finale, no ultimate revenge, just a slow, quiet separation as we both moved forward with our separate lives. My therapist told me that was normal too, that our culture conditions us to expect dramatic resolutions to conflict when real life is usually much more mundane. Closure, she said, isn't usually a single moment. It's a process. It's choosing every day to move forward rather than backward. And that's what I did. I moved forward. I excelled at work, getting a promotion myself that came with a significant raise. I used that raise to finally book the vacation I'd been putting off for years, a 2-week trip to New Zealand that was absolutely incredible. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my relationship with Jessica. I took up rock climbing, discovered I was terrible at it, but enjoyed it anyway. I built a life that was mine, fully and completely mine, not contingent on anyone else. 6 months after our breakup, I was out at a bar with friends celebrating Marcus's birthday when I saw her. Jessica, across the room, apparently there for the same reason with her own group of friends. Our eyes met for just a moment, and I felt my stomach drop. All the peace I'd built, all the moving forward I'd done, suddenly felt fragile. But then Jessica did something I didn't expect. She gave me a small nod, almost respectful, and then turned back to her conversation. She didn't come over, didn't cause a scene, didn't try to engage with me at all. It was an acknowledgement, nothing more. A recognition that we existed in the same city, sometimes in the same spaces, but that we were no longer part of each other's lives. I relaxed and turned back to my own friends, to the laughter and the celebration and the life I'd built without her. And I realized something important. I'd won. Not in the dramatic, destructive way I'd sometimes fantasized about in my angriest moments, but in the way that actually mattered. I'd survived her betrayal. I'd stood up for myself. I'd made sure the truth was known and that there were consequences for her actions. And then I'd moved on and built something better. Jessica would always have to live with what she'd done, with the reputation she'd earned, with the opportunities she'd lost. That was her burden to carry. Mine was lighter now. I'd let go of the anger, processed the grief, and found my way to something that looked a lot like peace. As the night went on, I found myself genuinely having fun, not thinking about Jessica or the past, just enjoying the present moment with people who cared about me. And when we finally left the bar, when I walked past Jessica's table on my way to the door and she didn't even look up, I realized that she'd become what she should have been all along: irrelevant. The real revenge, I understood then, wasn't destroying her life. It was building mine to the point where her presence or absence no longer mattered to me at all. About a week after that bar encounter, something unexpected arrived in my mail. A letter, handwritten, with Jessica's distinctive looping script on the envelope. My first instinct was to throw it away unopened. I'd worked so hard to move past everything, and I didn't want to invite her back into my headspace. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened it carefully, half expecting more accusations or attempts at manipulation. Instead, what I found was something closer to an apology. Not a full one, not the kind that took complete responsibility without any justifications, but closer than I'd ever expected to get from Jessica. "Sarah," it began, "I don't expect you to read this, and I don't expect you to respond. But I needed to write it anyway, for my own peace of mind if nothing else. I've spent the last several months being angry at you, blaming you for everything that went wrong in my life. But I've started therapy recently, and my therapist has been helping me see things differently. You were right about a lot of things. I was selfish. I was entitled. I made terrible choices and then blamed everyone but myself when those choices had consequences. I cheated on you for months and then had the audacity to be surprised when you didn't just quietly accept it. I used you financially and emotionally while giving very little back. I was a bad partner and an even worse person. I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve that, and I'm not entitled to it. I'm writing this because you deserve to hear me say, clearly and without qualification, that I was wrong. What I did to you was inexcusable. The affair, the stealing, the cruel things I said, all of it. You didn't deserve any of that. I also need to acknowledge that what happened after we broke up, the consequences I faced, those were my own doing. You didn't get me fired. My affair with a client and my violation of company ethics policies got me fired. You didn't turn people against me. My own actions did that. I spent so long trying to paint myself as the victim that I couldn't see the truth, but I see it now. I don't know if this helps you at all. Maybe you've already moved on completely and this is just an unwelcome intrusion. If so, I'm sorry for that too. But I needed you to know that I finally understand. I finally see what I did, and I'm ashamed of it. I hope you're doing well, Sarah. I hope you found happiness and peace. You always deserved both of those things, and I'm sorry I couldn't give them to you. I'm sorry for everything. Jessica. I read the letter 3 times, looking for hidden barbs or manipulations, but I couldn't find any. It seemed genuine, or as genuine as Jessica was capable of being. The apology was imperfect, still contained some self-focus, but it was more than I'd ever thought I'd receive. I sat with the letter for a long time, trying to figure out how I felt about it. Vindicated, certainly. Relieved, maybe, but also a little sad. Sad for the time we'd wasted, for the relationship that could have been if Jessica had been capable of honesty and commitment, for the version of her I'd fallen in love with that apparently never really existed. I thought about responding, about acknowledging her apology and maybe offering some kind of closure for both of us. I even drafted a few versions of a reply. But in the end, I decided not to send anything. Jessica said she didn't expect a response, and I believed the healthiest thing for both of us was to let this truly be the end. She'd said what she needed to say. I'd read it and processed it, and now we could both truly move forward. I put the letter in a folder with all the other documentation from our relationship and breakup, a physical archive of a chapter of my life that was now closed. Then I went back to living, to building, to moving forward with the life I'd created for myself. Another few months passed. Claire, the teacher I'd been seeing, became my girlfriend. It was official and wonderful and completely different from my relationship with Jessica. Claire was steady and honest and showed up for me consistently. We talked about everything, our pasts and our fears and our hopes for the future. There were no games, no manipulation, no wondering where I stood or whether I was enough. With Claire, I was always enough, more than enough, and I made sure she felt the same way. I also got more involved with my community. I started volunteering with a local organization that helped people recover from financial abuse, using my skills as a financial analyst to help survivors untangle complicated financial situations created by their abusers. It was hard work, emotionally draining sometimes, but also incredibly fulfilling. I was taking my own painful experience and using it to help others, turning something negative into something positive. Through this volunteer work, I met dozens of people who'd been through variations of what I experienced. Partners who'd stolen from them, who'd run up debts in their names, who'd sabotaged their careers or isolated them from support systems. Hearing their stories made me realize how relatively lucky I'd been. Yes, Jessica had betrayed and hurt me, but I'd had the resources and support to fight back, to protect myself, to recover. Not everyone did. One woman I worked with, named Denise, had been married to a man who'd secretly drained their entire retirement account to support a gambling addiction. Another, Robert, had discovered his husband had been taking out credit cards in his name for years, leaving him with over $100,000 in debt. Their stories made my stolen $5,000 seem almost trivial by comparison, though my therapist reminded me that pain isn't a competition, that my experience was valid regardless of how it compared to others. Still, helping these people gave me perspective. It also gave me purpose. I'd been so focused on my own situation, my own revenge and recovery, that I'd forgotten how good it felt to help others. This volunteer work reminded me that there was a bigger world out there, full of people who needed support and advocacy. One evening, almost a year after my breakup with Jessica, I was leaving the community center where the financial abuse organization held its meetings when I ran into Amanda Chen, David's wife. I almost didn't recognize her at first. She looked different, lighter somehow, less burdened. "Sarah," she said, clearly surprised to see me, "what are you doing here?" "I volunteer with the financial recovery program," I explained. "What about you?" "I'm part of the support group for partners recovering from infidelity," she said. "I've been coming for about 6 months now." We stood there for a moment, two women connected by betrayal, now connected by recovery. "Do you want to grab coffee?" Amanda asked. "I'd love to catch up if you have time." We went to a nearby cafe, and Amanda told me what had happened in the year since we'd last spoken. She'd stayed with David initially, tried to make the marriage work for the sake of their kids. But David had continued to lie, had been unable to give up the excitement of affairs. She'd caught him texting another woman, someone from his gym, just a few months after he'd promised to change. "That's when I knew," Amanda said. "It wasn't about Jessica specifically. It was about him, about his need for validation and excitement that had nothing to do with me or our marriage. So I left, filed for divorce, It's been hard, but I'm happier than I've been in years. I felt a wave of admiration for her. Leaving a marriage, especially with kids involved, took incredible courage. How are your children handling it? Better than I expected, honestly. They can sense that I'm less stressed, less anxious. And David is actually a decent father when he's not being a terrible husband. We're managing co-parenting okay. She took a sip of her coffee. What about you? How have you been? I told her about my own journey. The therapy, the new relationship, the volunteer work. I told her about Jessica's letter, about the gradual process of letting go of anger and finding peace. Amanda listened with understanding, nodding at the parts that resonated with her own experience. It's strange, isn't it? She said. How betrayal can actually lead to growth, to becoming stronger and more self-aware. I'm not glad David cheated, but I am glad I found out who he really was before I wasted any more years with him. I feel the same way about Jessica, I admitted. If she hadn't shown her true colors, I might have married her. Spent years trying to make it work with someone who fundamentally didn't respect or value me. In a weird way, her betrayal was a gift. A painful one, but a gift nonetheless. We talked for over an hour, sharing stories and strategies for healing, laughing about the absurdity of some of our experiences. By the time we parted ways, exchanging numbers and promising to meet up again, I felt grateful for the encounter. Amanda understood what I'd been through in a way most people couldn't. We were part of an unfortunate club, but at least we weren't alone in it. Walking home that night, I thought about how far I'd come from that November evening when Jessica had come home drunk and told me I wasn't enough. How broken I'd felt in the immediate aftermath, how all-consuming my anger had been, how much energy I'd poured into making sure she faced consequences. All of that had been necessary, I thought. Not because revenge was inherently valuable, but because standing up for myself was. Refusing to accept Jessica's narrative, refusing to be the quiet, boring ex-girlfriend who just faded away while she moved on to her exciting new life, that had been important for my own self-respect. But the real healing had come later. In therapy, in building a new relationship, in helping others, in simply living a good life that had nothing to do with Jessica at all. That was the ultimate revenge, if you could even call it that. Not destroying her, but building myself up to the point where she became irrelevant. I thought about something my therapist had said recently. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. For so long, I'd hated Jessica, had been consumed by anger at what she'd done. But now I felt mostly indifference. She was someone I used to know, someone who'd hurt me once, but who no longer had any power over my life or my happiness. That indifference, I realized, was freedom. True, complete freedom from the hold she'd had on me. As I entered my apartment, greeted by the warm light and the plants I'd been cultivating and the life I'd built entirely on my own terms, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Genuine, uncomplicated happiness. Not happiness in spite of what had happened, but almost because of it. Because I'd survived something hard and come out stronger. Because I'd learned what I deserved and refused to accept anything less. Because I discovered capabilities and strengths I didn't know I possessed. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Still on for dinner tomorrow. I'm thinking of trying that new Thai place downtown. I smiled and texted back, perfect, can't wait. And I meant it. I couldn't wait for tomorrow, for the next day, for all the days stretching out ahead of me. Days that belonged to me, that I got to fill with people and experiences and choices that brought me joy. Days that Jessica had no claim to, no presence in, no power over. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months. No checking the security cameras, no jumping at every sound, no anxiety about what Jessica might do next. Just deep, restful sleep, the kind that comes from a clear conscience and a life well lived. When I woke up the next morning, I did something symbolic. I took that folder full of documentation, all the emails and receipts and evidence I'd so carefully compiled, and I put it in the back of my closet. Not thrown away, because I wasn't naive enough to think I might never need it again, but filed away. Archived. Part of my past, but not part of my present. Then I went about my day. Work, where I was thriving. Lunch with a colleague who'd become a real friend. An evening workout that left me energized rather than exhausted. dinner with Claire, where we laughed and talked and made plans for a weekend trip to the coast. These were the moments that made up my life now. Simple, genuine, good moments. And if, somewhere in the city, Jessica was having her own moments, her own experiences, her own journey toward growth or happiness or whatever she was seeking, that was fine. It had nothing to do with me. Our stories had intersected once, painfully and destructively, but now they were separate. Parallel lines that would never meet again. That was exactly how it should be. As spring turned to summer and summer to fall, I found myself thinking about Jessica less and less. Whole weeks would go by without her crossing my mind. When I did think about her, it was with a detachment that would have seemed impossible a year ago. She was a character in a story I used to be part of, a cautionary tale about betrayal and consequences, but no longer a presence in my actual life. I heard occasional updates through mutual acquaintances. Jessica had been promoted at her new job. She was dating someone new. She'd moved to a nicer apartment. Each piece of information was met with the same response from me, a mild, "that's nice," and then a return to whatever I'd been doing. Her successes didn't threaten me. Her happiness didn't anger me. It was all just information about a stranger because that's what she'd become, a stranger who I used to know. The 1-year anniversary of our breakup came and went without ceremony. I didn't mark it or mourn it or celebrate it. It was just another day, made meaningful only by the fact that I'd survived it and all the days that came after. I'd survived and thrived and built something beautiful from the rubble of what Jessica had destroyed. Claire and I were getting serious, talking about moving in together, about futures and possibilities. My career was flourishing in ways it never had when I was with Jessica, when so much of my energy had been diverted to managing her moods and funding her dreams. My friendships were deeper, my sense of self stronger, my life richer and more authentic. Sometimes, late at night when I couldn't sleep, I'd think about that version of myself who'd been so broken that November night. The Sarah who'd stood in her apartment surrounded by cold candles and wilted flowers, listening to the person she loved tell her she wasn't enough. And I'd wish I could go back and tell her that it was going to be okay. Better than okay. That the pain she was feeling was temporary, but the strength she'd gain from surviving it would be permanent. I'd tell her that revenge wasn't really about destroying the person who hurt you. It was about refusing to let them destroy you. It was about taking back your power, your narrative, your life. It was about standing up and saying, "I deserve better than this," and then actually doing the work to build that better life. I'd tell her that yes, Jessica would face consequences for her actions. Her job, her reputation, her relationships, all of it would suffer because of the choices she made. But more importantly, Sarah, I would be fine, more than fine. I'd be happy and whole and free in ways I'd never been even before Jessica betrayed me. But I couldn't go back and tell that broken version of myself anything. All I could do was live well, live fully, and trust that wherever she was, whatever she was doing, Jessica could see that I'd won. Not by destroying her, but by building a life so complete and satisfying that her presence or absence in it was utterly irrelevant. And that, I'd finally learned, was the sweetest revenge of all. 2 years. That's how long it had been since that November night when everything changed. 2 full years of healing and growing and becoming someone I barely recognized when I looked back at who I used to be. And on this particular autumn evening, I found myself doing something I never thought I'd do. I was preparing to speak at a conference about financial abuse and recovery, sharing my story publicly for the first time. Standing backstage at the community center's main hall, I could hear the murmur of the crowd gathering. Over 100 people had registered for this event, survivors of financial abuse and the professionals who worked with them. My hands were shaking slightly as I held my notes, not from fear exactly, but from the weight of what I was about to do. I was about to take my most painful experience and turn it into something that could help others. The organizer, a kind woman named Patricia, not Jessica's mother, different Patricia, touched my shoulder gently. "You're going to be wonderful," she said. "Your story matters. These people need to hear it." I nodded, taking a deep breath. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "You've got this, love. I'm so proud of you. Can't wait to celebrate after." Just reading her words steadied me. I had support now, real support from people who genuinely cared about me. That alone was proof of how far I'd come. When they called my name, I walked onto that stage with my head held high. The lights were bright, making it hard to see individual faces in the audience, which actually helped with my nerves. I adjusted the microphone and began. My name is Sarah, and 2 years ago, the person I was planning to marry came home drunk and told me I needed to leave because she deserved better than me. My voice was steady, stronger than I expected. What happened next taught me things about myself I never knew, about justice and healing, about the difference between revenge and self-respect. And I want to share that journey with you tonight, because if even one person here feels less alone after hearing it, then the pain I went through will have served a purpose. I told them everything. Not every detail, not every private moment, but the arc of it. The betrayal, the discovery of the affair, the stolen money. I told them about the cold anger that had driven me to expose Jessica's lies, about the consequences she'd faced, about how satisfying and hollow that satisfaction had sometimes felt. I told them about the harassment, the break-in, the fear and the therapy, and the slow, difficult work of healing. But I also told them about what came after, about building a new life, about finding love again, about discovering strength I didn't know I possessed. I told them about the freedom that came from indifference, from genuinely not caring anymore what Jessica was doing or thinking or feeling. I told them about the moment I realized I'd won, not because I'd destroyed her, but because I'd rebuilt myself. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. I could feel their attention, their understanding. Many of them were nodding, seeing pieces of their own stories reflected in mine. When I finished, when I delivered the final line about revenge being less about destruction and more about refusing to be destroyed, the applause was thunderous. People stood, a standing ovation for my pain, for my survival, for my willingness to share it all. Tears were streaming down my face, but they were good tears, healing tears. I'd taken the worst thing that had ever happened to me and transformed it into something meaningful, something that could help others. That transformation felt like the final piece of my healing, the last step in my journey from victim to survivor to thriver. After the speech, during the reception, dozens of people came up to me. They shared their own stories, thanked me for my honesty, asked questions about how I'd found the courage to stand up for myself. One woman, probably in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, gripped my hand tightly. "I stayed," she told me. "When I found out my husband had been stealing from me, had been lying for years, I stayed because I was afraid of being alone. But hearing your story, hearing how you demanded better for yourself, it's making me rethink everything. Maybe I deserve better too." "You do," I told her firmly. "You absolutely do, and you're strong enough to claim it." Watching her walk away, her shoulders a little straighter, her expression a little more determined, I felt something profound. This was it. This was the real victory. Not Jessica's job loss or damaged reputation, but this woman finding the courage to value herself. This was what all the pain had been for. Claire found me near the end of the reception, pulling me into a tight hug. "You were incredible," she whispered. "Absolutely incredible. I'm so lucky to have you in my life." "I'm the lucky one," I replied, and I meant it. Claire had shown me what a healthy relationship looked like. What it felt like to be with someone who was consistent and honest and truly committed. She'd helped me understand that what I'd had with Jessica was never really love, just intensity and chemistry masquerading as something deeper. We left the conference center together, walking through the cool autumn evening toward our favorite restaurant where we had reservations to celebrate. The streets were busy with people heading to dinner or shows, living their lives, chasing their own happiness. And I was one of them now, just another person building a life, no longer defined by what had been done to me, but by what I'd chosen to do next. Over dinner, Claire reached across the table and took my hand. "I've been thinking about something," she said, a slight nervousness in her voice. "We've been talking about moving in together for a while now, and I know we agreed to wait until the end of the year, but I don't want to wait anymore. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a home with you. What do you think?" I looked at her, this wonderful woman who'd been patient with my healing process, who'd never pressured me or made me feel like I was too damaged or too cautious. And I realized I was ready, truly ready to take that step, to trust someone with my heart and my home and my future again. I think yes, I said, smiling so wide my cheeks hurt. I think absolutely yes. We spent the rest of dinner making plans, talking about logistics and furniture, and what our combined life would look like. It felt joyful and exciting and completely different from the wedding planning I'd done with Jessica. With Claire, everything was collaborative. We both contributed, both compromised, both prioritized each other's happiness. There was no keeping score, no resentment, just two people genuinely wanting to build something together. Walking home that night, my hand in Claire's, I found myself thinking about Jessica one last time. Not with anger or satisfaction or even curiosity, but with something closer to gratitude. She'd hurt me terribly, yes. She'd betrayed me and stolen from me and tried to make me believe I wasn't enough. But in doing so, she'd inadvertently given me a gift. She'd shown me what I wouldn't tolerate anymore. She'd revealed strengths I didn't know I had. She'd cleared the path for me to find something real and healthy and good with Claire. And she'd given me a story that could help others, a painful experience that I'd transformed into purpose. Would I go back and change things if I could? Would I erase that November night and the months of pain that followed? I thought about it seriously. And the answer, surprisingly, was no. Because erasing that pain would mean erasing everything I'd learned, everything I'd become. It would mean still being the Sarah who accepted less than she deserved, who worked herself to exhaustion for someone who didn't appreciate it, who didn't know her own worth. That Sarah was gone. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, more self-assured. Someone who'd walked through fire and come out forged into something better. And I liked this version of myself. I was proud of her, of who she'd become, of how she'd handled an impossible situation with grace and strength, and yes, justified anger. The next morning, I woke up in my apartment for one of the last times. Claire and I had decided she'd move in with me since my place was bigger, and we'd spend the next few weeks making it truly ours. As I made coffee and looked around at the space that had been my sanctuary during the hardest time of my life, I felt a wave of affection for it. This apartment had sheltered me when I was broken. It had been the backdrop for my healing, my growth, my transformation. Within these walls, I'd cried and raged and slowly, gradually put myself back together. And now it would become something new, something shared, something that represented not just survival but joy. My phone rang, interrupting my reflective moment. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, old habits making me cautious, but something made me pick up. Hello. There was a pause, then a familiar voice, though it sounded different somehow. More mature, less certain. Sarah, it's Jessica, please don't hang up. I stood very still, coffee cup frozen halfway to my lips. In 2 years, I hadn't heard her voice. Hadn't spoken to her since that parking garage confrontation. What do you want, Jessica? I heard about your speech last night, at the conference. She took a breath. A friend of mine was there. She told me about it, about what you said, and I needed to call you, I needed to tell you something. I waited, saying nothing. I'd learned that silence was powerful, that I didn't owe Jessica anything, not even words to fill awkward pauses. You were right, she continued. About everything. I've been in therapy for over a year now, really doing the work, and I finally understand what I did to you. Not just the affair or the money, but the deeper betrayal. I made you feel like you weren't enough when the truth was I wasn't enough. I wasn't mature enough or honest enough or brave enough to be the partner you deserved. I sat down slowly on my couch, processing this. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to hear it. And because your speech, what my friend told me about it, made me realize that you've turned what I did into something meaningful. You're helping people. And I'm so sorry that my actions are what gave you that story to tell, but I'm also glad you're using it for good. Jessica, I appreciate the apology, I do, but I need you to understand something. I've moved on. Completely. You're not part of my life anymore, and this call doesn't change that. I know, she said quietly. I'm not calling to try to be in your life again. I'm calling to release you from any remaining hold I might have, to tell you that you were right to do what you did. Right to expose the affair, right to protect yourself, right to make sure I faced consequences. I hated you for it at the time, but it was what I needed. It forced me to look at myself honestly for the first time in my life. What are you doing now? I asked, surprised to find I was genuinely curious. I'm working as a marketing manager at a nonprofit. The pay isn't great, but the work matters. I'm single, focusing on myself for the first time ever instead of jumping from relationship to relationship. I'm learning to be okay alone, to find my worth in myself rather than in whether someone finds me exciting or desirable. She paused. I'm becoming someone I actually like, finally. Someone who might actually deserve a good partner someday, though I'm not looking for that right now. I'm glad you're doing better, I said, and meant it. Not because I cared deeply about Jessica's well-being, but because her growth meant she was less likely to hurt someone else the way she'd hurt me. I heard you're with someone new. Claire, I think. I hope she knows how lucky she is. And I hope you're happy, Sarah. Really, genuinely happy. You always deserved that. I am happy, I told her. Happier than I've ever been. Good, that's good. Jessica's voice got thick with emotion. I know I don't have the right to ask this, but do you think someday you might be able to forgive me? Not forget, and not let me back in your life, but just forgive for your own peace. I thought about it carefully. Forgiveness was complicated. It didn't mean what happened was okay, didn't mean there shouldn't have been consequences. But it did mean releasing the last threads of anger, of pain, of connection to that awful time. I think I already have, I said slowly, realizing it was true as I said it. Not for you, but for me, because holding on to anger was exhausting and I wanted to put that energy toward better things. So yes, Jessica, I forgive you. But that doesn't change anything between us. We're still done, still moving in different directions. I understand, and thank you for the forgiveness and for everything you taught me, even though I made you teach me the hard way. She took a shaky breath. I'll let you go now. I won't call again. But I wanted you to know that I see what I did, and I'm sorry, and I hope your life is everything you want it to be. Goodbye, Jessica, I said gently. Goodbye, Sarah. The line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, phone in hand, processing what had just happened. That call was closure, real closure, the kind I'd thought I didn't need anymore but apparently did. Jessica had taken full responsibility, had acknowledged not just what she'd done but why it was wrong, had released me from any obligation to her, even the obligation of ongoing anger. And more importantly, she'd told me I was right. Right to stand up for myself, right to demand consequences, right to refuse to be the quiet victim in her story. That validation from the person who'd hurt me most felt significant even though I didn't need it anymore. It was confirmation that the path I'd chosen, the difficult road of truth and accountability, had been the right one. I called Claire immediately, needed to tell her about the conversation, to process it with someone I trusted. How do you feel? Claire asked after I'd relayed the whole thing. Lighter, I said, surprised to find it was true. I thought I was completely over it, and I was mostly. But I didn't realize I was still carrying this tiny bit of wondering if maybe I'd been too harsh, too vindictive. And hearing Jessica say I was right to do what I did, that it actually helped her in the long run even though it hurt at the time, it released something I didn't know I was holding on to. You were never vindictive, Claire said firmly. You were protective of yourself and honest about what happened. There's a huge difference. I know, but it's good to hear Jessica finally understands that too. That afternoon, I did something symbolic. I went to my closet and pulled out that folder, the one full of all the documentation I'd so carefully compiled. Emails and receipts and screenshots and police reports. The evidence of everything that had happened, preserved just in case I ever needed it again. I didn't need it anymore. Jessica wasn't a threat. She wasn't going to harass me or try to rewrite history or cause problems in my life. She genuinely moved on, just as I had. So I took that folder to my shredder, and page by page, I destroyed it all. Each sheet that went through the shredder felt like a weight lifting. This was me, actively choosing to let go of the last physical remnants of that painful time. I was keeping the lessons I'd learned, the strength I'd gained, the story that could help others. But I was destroying the evidence, the proof, the ammunition. I didn't need to be armed against Jessica anymore. When the last page was shredded, I stood in my office surrounded by bags of paper scraps and felt profoundly, completely free. The past was truly past now, not forgotten, but processed and integrated and released. I was ready for whatever came next, unburdened by anger or fear or the need to protect myself from someone who was no longer a threat. That evening, Claire came over with Thai takeout and a bottle of wine to celebrate the beginning of our moving-in process. We sat on my couch, eating pad Thai and making lists of what furniture we'd keep and what we'd donate, talking about paint colors and how to combine our different styles into something that reflected both of us. "I love this," Claire said at one point, gesturing vaguely at the apartment, at us, at the life we were building. "I love how easy it is, how natural. Is that strange? Shouldn't moving in together be more stressful?" "Maybe it's only stressful when it's with the wrong person," I suggested. "With the right person, even the hard stuff feels manageable." "That's very wise," she said, kissing my cheek. "When did you get so wise?" "When I survived something that should have broken me but didn't," I replied. "Trauma is a terrible teacher, but you learn the lessons thoroughly." Later that night, after Claire had gone home to start packing her own things, I stood at my bedroom window looking out at the Seattle skyline. The city lights sparkled against the dark sky, thousands of individual lives playing out in those buildings, each with their own dramas and triumphs and heartbreaks. I thought about all the versions of myself that had stood at this window over the years. The Sarah who'd been happily in love with Jessica, planning a future that seemed certain. The Sarah who'd been shattered by betrayal, wondering how she'd survive. The Sarah who'd been consumed by cold anger, determined to make sure Jessica faced consequences. The Sarah who'd been afraid, installing security systems and looking over her shoulder. The Sarah who'd been healing, slowly rebuilding piece by piece. And now, this Sarah, happy and whole and ready for a beautiful future. All of those versions were part of me, part of my story. I didn't regret any of them, even the broken ones, even the angry ones. They'd all been necessary steps on the path to who I was now. And who I was now was someone who understood that revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about refusing to let someone else's actions define you. It was about standing up and saying, "I deserve better," and then doing the work to build that better life. It was about transformation, about taking pain and turning it into purpose, about surviving and then thriving. Jessica had told me I wasn't enough, that I was boring and undeserving. And in response, I'd proven her wrong in the most fundamental way possible. Not by becoming more exciting or spontaneous or whatever she thought she needed, but by becoming more fully myself, by building a life so rich and meaningful that her opinion of me became irrelevant. That was the real revenge, not her lost job or damaged reputation, though those were natural consequences of her actions. The real revenge was my happiness, my peace, my complete and utter indifference to whether she approved of me or not. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app, where I'd been writing down thoughts for a blog I was considering starting for survivors of betrayal. I typed, "The best revenge isn't destroying the person who hurt you. It's building a life so beautiful that their presence or absence in it is utterly irrelevant. It's being happy in spite of what they did, and then eventually because of what you learned from it. It's transformation. It's freedom. It's choosing yourself, every single day, until choosing yourself becomes as natural as breathing." I read it over, edited it slightly, and then saved it. That was the message I wanted to share, the lesson I'd learned the hard way. Revenge didn't have to be cruel or destructive. It could be quiet and powerful and focused entirely on your own growth rather than someone else's downfall. As I got ready for bed that night, I felt genuinely excited about the future in a way I hadn't since before Jessica's betrayal. I was excited to live with Claire, to see what we could build together. I was excited about my work, both my career and my volunteer efforts. I was excited about the person I was becoming, still growing, still learning, still evolving. Jessica was a chapter in my story, an important one that had shaped me in significant ways. But she was just one chapter, not the whole book. And the chapters that came after, the ones I was writing now and would write in the future, those were going to be so much better than anything that came before. I climbed into bed, my last night sleeping alone in this apartment, and I felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for surviving, for healing, for learning, for growing. Gratitude for the people who'd supported me, for the therapy that had helped me process everything, for the opportunities I'd had to turn pain into purpose. Even gratitude for Jessica, in a strange way, for showing me what I didn't want and forcing me to fight for what I did. And as I drifted off to sleep, my last thought was this. She tried to break me, but instead, she made me unbreakable. She tried to convince me I wasn't enough, but instead, she forced me to realize I was more than enough. She tried to take everything from me, but instead, she cleared the path for me to find something so much better. I won, not because I destroyed her, but because I built myself. And that victory, that transformation, was something no one could ever take away from me. That's the real story of revenge. Not the destruction of an enemy, but the construction of yourself. Not bitterness, but growth. Not spending your life looking back in anger, but moving forward with purpose and peace and genuine happiness. Jessica came home drunk that November night and told me I needed to leave because she deserved better. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have predicted, was that by saying those words, she set me free to find out just how much better I deserved. And I found it. I found peace, purpose, love, strength, and a future brighter than anything I'd imagined when I was with her. So if you're listening to this story and you're going through your own betrayal, your own heartbreak, your own moment of being told you're not enough, please hear this. You are enough. You always have been. And the person who can't see that, who treats you as disposable or unworthy, they're the one who's not enough. Not you. Stand up for yourself. Tell the truth. Demand consequences for those who hurt you. But most importantly, pour your energy into building a life so beautiful, so fulfilling, so genuinely joyful that the person who betrayed you becomes nothing more than a footnote in your story. A small chapter that taught you important lessons but doesn't define the whole book. That's how you win. That's how you heal. That's how you transform pain into power. And trust me when I tell you, when you finally get there, when you're standing in the life you built from the rubble someone else created, the satisfaction is sweeter than any revenge could ever be. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you write yours. Remember, you deserve better, and you're strong enough to claim it. I believe in you. Now go out there and build something beautiful.